How about that, you poor thing? I've eliminated the smell of poverty for you, so you should be grateful." With those words, champagne splashed my face with force. This occurred when I went to greet my fiancé's family. Far from being concerned about me, Evan, my fiancé, started laughing loudly as if to mock me. I quickly realized that my carefully styled hair and the clothes I was wearing had all been for nothing. In the end, all I felt was emptiness. "I will therefore terminate our contract with your company." Upon hearing my statement, Marjorie, Evan's mother who splashed the champagne on me, and Evan himself both expressed their shock with astonishment. Before these two, who couldn't even understand what was happening, Evan's father, Chairman Richard Hale, suddenly appeared. "Mr. Hale, you had mentioned before that you plan to retire soon and hand over your duties to your son. In such circumstances, it's reasonable to reconsider how much my company can trust a future business leader. There might have been an intention to maintain our relationship through your son marrying me, but unfortunately it has backfired." After finishing all explanations, I quietly left the scene. Marjorie, who had overheard my conversation with Chairman Hale, was too upset to say anything. Of course, this is not the end. They need to fully face the consequences of their actions. My name is Maribel Rowan. I am 48 years old and have never been married. Remaining single all my life, I always prioritized work and cherished my alone time. Thanks to my hobbies of reading and watching movies, I have spent fulfilling days, which is why I have never developed an interest in marriage. As I aged, that spring in April when the flowers were in full bloom, an unexpected marriage proposal came my way. The introducer was Richard Hale, with whom I had a business relationship. "Ms. Rowan, I would very much like to introduce you to someone." "How about it?" he said. Initially hesitant, I decided to meet the person after being strongly urged. That person, Evan, was the same age as me and the son of Chairman Hale. He is the youngest son with several older sisters. He has come close to marriage several times before, but he remains unmarried. "I have one request if you don't mind," I said. Our first meeting was conditional, but Evan was a polite and kind person, and I immediately took a liking to him. I started thinking that maybe it would be all right to marry him, so I suggested that we start dating. Both Chairman Hale and Evan were pleased with this proposal, and things started off smoothly. However, I could never have imagined that this choice would lead to an unexpected situation later on. 5 weeks into our relationship, on our third date, Evan said with a smile, "We're already like a couple, aren't we?" Unlike before, Evan wore a casual jacket and appeared relaxed and youthful. This time, I had switched from my previous dressed-up style to a casual pants look. Although we are both older, our feelings at that moment were as fresh as those of young people. However, as the date began, I felt something off about Evan's behavior. He often made comments that seemed condescending. For example, he took me to a slightly upscale restaurant and said proudly, "You wouldn't normally get to come to a place like this, right? It must be unusual for you." I could only respond with an ambiguous smile to his words. In fact, this restaurant is one of my favorites, and I had just visited it with a friend 3 days ago. But it would have been cruel to embarrass him on the spot, so I didn't tell him the truth. A waiter I knew nodded at my signal and pretended to be ignorant. While sitting, I noticed the watch on Evan's wrist. It wasn't a top-of-the-line item, but it was decent. "That's a different watch from before. The color is lovely, and it suits you," I complimented. Embarrassed, Evan took off the watch to show it to me. Mistaking my interest, he seemed to offer it out of kindness. Since I wasn't deeply interested, I briefly checked it and returned it. But he seemed to insist on giving it again. "Feel free to take a closer look. It's not often you see something this high-end, right? No need to be shy." My reaction was not so much out of politeness as it was just a lack of interest in men's watches. Though I agreed to take it when he insisted, I felt a bit perplexed. To me, a watch is just an accessory, and I think checking the time on a smartphone is sufficient. So I mentioned his watch casually, just as I might compliment a friend's new decorative item. Many of the older people I work with wear them too, so I actually see them quite often. "Thank you for showing it to me. It's nice to have something you like." At that, Evan slightly pouted and surreptitiously followed my belongings with his gaze. What caught his interest was a bag that I am particularly fond of. This bag was specially made for me at a favorite workshop, reflecting the craftsman's skill and my taste, and is very practical. It's a bit pricey, but it seemed cheap to Evan. I was wondering, don't you have a proper bag instead? I think you should have something more prestigious. The bag was custom-made at an Italian leather workshop and naturally doesn't have a brand logo. In fact, the craftsman's workshop mark is branded on the bottom of the bag. However, I prefer simple designs above all, so I asked to hide it. It would be difficult for someone not accustomed to women's bags to judge its price just by looking. But I couldn't help but be puzzled by his consistently superior tone. Sometimes I dismissed it, accepting that he's a sheltered son who doesn't know the world, but the feeling of discomfort doesn't easily go away. At one point, I thought about reconsidering marriage, but since we'd only met 3 times, it seemed too hasty to decide on a separation. So I decided to wait and see how things would unfold. Since then, we have continued dating. Evan does show some immaturity at times, but he is essentially an honest person. He no longer exhibits the unnatural behavior he showed before. No one is perfect from the start. If you have patience and gradually find harmony, love will eventually grow, said an older female celebrity on a show I watched for distraction. I found some truth in those words. The following week, we went to a famous hotel buffet for our 5th date. Strangely, Evan piled 3 or 4 servings of food onto his plate. Are you sure it's okay to take so much? It would be a waste if you can't finish it, I lightly commented. To which he suddenly burst into laughter. Wondering what was so funny, he said, "A waste? Maribel, are you still talking like someone poor? It's okay to take this much. It doesn't matter if I throw it away if I can't eat it all." I made a sour face. It seemed he completely failed to understand that wasting food not only incurs costs but also discomforts other customers. The issue isn't just about money, it's about resources and the environment. Aren't you aware of the concept of food waste? It's also inconsiderate to other customers. And eating disorderly isn't good. My voice carried more sternness than usual. In response, Evan suddenly shrank back as he poked at his pasta with a fork. He muttered, "I'm sorry. Please don't be angry. My mommy said you might be marrying me for money, and I just reacted without thinking." The word mommy lingered in my ears, and I inadvertently repeated it. Referring to one's mother as mommy is uncommon and suggested a peculiarity about his family environment. As the date neared its end with this discomfort in mind, Evan drove me home. As I was getting out of the car, he grabbed my hand to stop me. "Ms. Rowan, even though I am who I am, would you marry me? Even if not right away. Being engaged is fine. As your fiancé can wait as long as it takes." I was taken aback by Evan's sudden forwardness, but soon I began to feel genuine joy from his actions. Although there are many concerning aspects about Evan, his courtship brought pure joy. I considered that the areas he lacks could be improved upon after marriage, nurturing him into a loving husband. 3 months had passed since we met, and I felt it was the right time to move forward. Let's grow together by complementing each other. We both have flaws and differences, so let's talk a lot and resolve them, I said with teary eyes, moved by emotion. However, the moment I agreed to the proposal, Evan once again exhibited problematic behavior. "Let's start preparing for married life. First, you should quit your job and take care of the home and learn the housework from my mommy," he began with a smile. My joy vanished, replaced by rising anger. I countered him more strongly than usual. "Don't be so presumptuous. If that's your attitude, then marriage is out of the question. Goodbye." Evan was silent, stunned. During that moment, I got out of the car and immediately went back into my house. Though I had decided to distance myself, I reluctantly agreed to meet after receiving a message from Evan over the weekend insisting on seeing me. The weekend came quickly, and Evan was already waiting at our meeting place when the appointed day arrived. As I approached, Evan stood up quickly and apologized deeply. "I'm really sorry about last time. My friends told me to lay down the law, and I took it seriously. They even scolded me for actually thinking it's okay to do that, Evan said, his energy low. His demeanor soon began to dissolve my anger. Just a while ago I felt like clicking my tongue at him, but ultimately I came to terms with it. It's somewhat disappointing, but he is dear to me. Evan is very straightforward, and sometimes it might be hard for him to distinguish between jokes and seriousness. He is easily influenced and somewhat indecisive. But I reminded myself that no one is perfect from the start. Make sure you keep this in mind. We're getting engaged after all, I said with a wry smile. At those words, Evan looked up suddenly and brightened. After a stormy engagement period, a month had passed. Finally, it was time to formally meet each other's families to announce our marriage. The first visit was to Evan's family home. Although I have had a long association with Chairman Hale, it was strictly professional, and this was my first time visiting his home, which was nerve-wracking. Evan was as gentle and lovely as usual, but he seemed a bit off since the morning of the visit. I thought he might be nervous, but apparently that wasn't the case. About my mom, he started. I braced myself, thinking of the potential issues between a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. However, I believed in his mother, known to be a hard-working woman and the kind-hearted wife of Chairman Hale. I hoped that if I spoke sincerely, she would understand. But I was mistaken. The moment I stepped into the room where we were supposed to greet each other, liquid splashed onto my face. My eyes hurt intensely. A strong irritation hit my nose, causing me to cough violently. I immediately panicked. "How about that, you poor thing? I got rid of the poor smell for you, so be thankful," I heard a mocking voice say. I was surprised by the bitter taste, the smell, and the heat. I realized the liquid that entered my mouth was champagne, but I was confused about why I received such treatment. "Marjorie, what are you doing?" Chairman Hale exclaimed in shock. The situation became clear. Evan's mother and my future mother-in-law, Marjorie, had thrown champagne in my face. It seemed the earlier mocking voice was also Marjorie's. I remembered how Evan had previously looked down on me as poor. I realized that this attitude might have come from Marjorie. "Ha ha ha, what's the matter, Maribel? You're all wet. Funny, isn't it? Go, mommy, typical of you." Evan laughed loudly. At that moment, I realized that everything up to this point had been in vain. Only emptiness piled up in my heart. "I will therefore terminate our contract with your company." "What?" At my statement, Evan and Marjorie both exclaimed in surprise. They hurriedly looked at each other and seemed to be discussing something in whispers. Whether it was about our business dealings or something else, I was not involved. As an outsider, I merely speculated about their conversation. At that moment, there was one person who remained quiet. That was Chairman Hale, who without a word looked pale and wide-eyed. I turned to him again, thanked him, and began to speak. "First of all, Chairman Hale, I would like to thank you for your cooperation so far. It must be due to the condition we agreed upon that such an incident did not occur before then." When I turned to speak to Marjorie and Evan, Marjorie looked at Chairman Hale with a doubtful expression and then stared at me sternly. Meanwhile, Evan watched Marjorie's reaction while looking at me. I continued quietly. "This may be an unexpected statement for you, but I hope you listen carefully. One condition of accepting the matchmaking was that I would not reveal that I am the president of a company until the marriage was decided. I thought my title might get in the way. My connection with Chairman Hale was born out of significant business transactions that I had built over the years while focusing on my business. I picked up my business card. Naturally, it listed my company name and position. Those not involved in management might not know the details of our transactions, but they would at least understand the title. "Hello again, Mrs. Hale. Thank you for all your help so far. This is my position. I have been working with your husband's company for over 10 years. Currently, my company is probably your biggest client. I wonder what percentage of your company's sales we represent." When I handed over my business card, Evan turned pale with surprise. He worked in his father's company, and seeing my company name should have made it clear who I was to Chairman Hale. "I am not just any business owner. I am the owner of one of his most important business partners. Therefore, I wanted my profession hidden initially to truly assess Evan's character when choosing a lifelong partner. I wanted to see the real person, not just superficial behavior. I cannot afford a contrived attitude, because it could affect the fate of a parent's company. Thus, I was introduced merely as someone I met through work. I wore fake glasses and significantly altered my makeup and hairstyle for our dates. While the disguise served as temporary amusement, in retrospect, it was a waste of time. I'm sorry, Chairman Hale, but I must decline this proposal. This concerns marriage, and also we need to pause our transactions to reassess the situation, I stated. Then I sat down to face Chairman Hale. Afterwards, I explained the situation as calmly as possible. Chairman Hale turned pale upon hearing my words and stuttered. The transactions are affected. That can't be right. His reaction seemed forced. I shook my head firmly, indicating that my decision was final. However, wanting him to understand that my decision was not based on fleeting emotion, I continued in a calm voice. Chairman Hale, you mentioned before planning to retire soon and hand over your responsibilities to your son. In such circumstances, it makes sense to reconsider how trustworthy a future business partner can be. There might have been an intention to maintain our relationship through your son marrying me, but unfortunately, it has backfired. Right after graduating from university, I started my own company with some friends. Over 20 years have passed since then, and I have led the business as its president throughout that time. As I've mentioned several times, I have built a relationship with your company over more than a decade. My company, managed from a female perspective, has been recognized for its unique approach and has been growing significantly. As a result, our transactions with your company have also increased. However, recently there has been internal discussion about whether to switch to new business partners. Amidst this situation, the sudden proposal of an arranged marriage came up. Considering the timing, Chairman Hale, you might have sensed some movement from our company. This was not particularly kept secret. After finding out who I am, Marjorie and Evan were clearly disturbed. I decided to explain the situation further. In fact, we were reviewing whether to continue our transactions with your company. I heard that your company is currently facing some management difficulties. Are you aware of that? What does that mean? Marjorie asked, shocked, while frantically shaking Chairman Hale's arm beside her. Chairman Hale wiped his sweat, flustered and anxious. It seemed that the company's issues had not been discussed within the family. Evan's glances between me and Chairman Hale caught my attention. Despite being an insider, Evan appeared not to understand the current state of his own company. While considering this puzzling situation, I continued the conversation. In light of this, Chairman Hale strongly suggested that I meet Evan, leading us to this point. Perhaps you considered this marriage proposal with the stability of your company in mind. It seems you wish to maintain our business relationship at all costs. Marjorie was visibly shaken, her hands trembling and lips quivering as I explained that Chairman Hale's company was indeed struggling with management issues. Marjorie may have looked down on me earlier, but her company is facing far more significant problems. Once praised for quality and speed, Chairman Hale's products have been technologically overtaken by competitors and no longer offer anything special. Moreover, development and manufacturing processes are inefficient. Cost reduction has not progressed, and product prices have become expensive. Additionally, the company imposes unacceptable pressure on employees under modern labor standards, shortening delivery times and further deteriorating its corporate reputation. Adopting products from a low-rated company can cause a domino effect, dragging down the reputation of business partners. Even a company with a long history faces challenges with outdated structures and high turnover among young employees. As a result, Chairman Hale's company's market share has gradually decreased, and performance continues to decline. Under such circumstances, it was natural for us to explore transactions with other stable companies. How dare you threaten to cut off business based on personal feelings? What a despicable act. Are you blackmailing us? This is the worst. Don't think such behavior is acceptable, Marjorie exclaimed in outrage. I was surprised by her accusatory behavior. The lack of an initial apology spoke volumes about her character. Before I could respond, Chairman Hale shouted vehemently, "Silence! This is all your fault." I swallowed what I was about to say. Indeed, Chairman Hale, not I, was the most damaged party here. The unexpected fallout from his wife's inappropriate behavior would have been unforeseen for him, who had hoped for stability. All of this stemmed from Chairman Hale's actions. Faithfully adhering to our agreement but keeping it a secret from Evan alone would have been sufficient. He should have informed his wife beforehand. As a result, I felt relieved that I didn't have to welcome such a problematic person as my mother-in-law. The sight of Evan was pitiful. Pale and trembling, he tightly gripped Marjorie's hand. It was sad to see a man nearing 50 still needing his mother's hand. Seeing his state, I couldn't help but give him a cold look. It's impossible that someone carrying such a cheap-looking bag could be a president. Moreover, you complained about food waste and acted poor. You're lying even about being my father's business partner. How disgraceful. Evan accused me vehemently. He might have been trying to shift blame, but he was mistaken. I am not interested in branded goods and prefer high-quality domestic leather products. My criticism of wasting large amounts of food was not because I am poor, but because it is inappropriate behavior. There was no calculated acting in this. Regarding this bag, it is custom-made from a workshop I frequent. Anyone knowledgeable would recognize its quality immediately. But it seems none of you are interested in the quality of leather. This bag is priced higher than commercial brands, I explained. Suddenly, Marjorie stared at my shoes and bag with astonishment, then quickly averted her gaze, embarrassed. Clearly, it is a matter of those who know understanding. Continued. Furthermore, ordering a large amount of food and not being able to finish it is not only wasteful but also disrespectful to the restaurant. It is unreasonable and inappropriate behavior. Moreover, the fact that I am your father's business partner is true. What would it mean if the presidents of companies doing business with each other did not know one another? Evan seemed dissatisfied and unconvinced. Chairman Hale frowned at his son's behavior. When it was confirmed that we knew each other, Evan looked down without a word. His clinging to Marjorie appeared extremely childish and out of place for his age. Faced with his immaturity, I felt deep disappointment. If your company abandons us, we will be on the brink of bankruptcy. Please forgive us. Chairman Hale began to apologize profusely. This statement finally made Marjorie realize the gravity of the situation. Realizing the consequences, Evan turned pale and began to tremble. "Mommy," he said with tears in his eyes, clinging to Marjorie. However, Marjorie was unable to respond. Witnessing this scene, I breathed a deep sigh of relief. I deeply regretted ever considering sharing my life with such a person. Thinking I could correct him because he was honest now felt naive. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," Chairman Hale repeated over and over without proposing any concrete solution. This could easily lead to severing ties on an emotional basis, so I was forced to make specific remarks about the engagement. Let's address our engagement. I cannot consider marrying someone whose mother behaves so rudely. Moreover, he did not try to stop his mother and even laughed along with her. I hope you understand why the engagement should be called off. Chairman Hale listened, repeating words of affirmation. Continued. Thank you for understanding. Until yesterday, I believed in Evan's potential for improvement and proceeded with the engagement. But now I feel relieved that our relationship has been dissolved. I then provided specific examples of Evan's behavior. For instance, his frequent quoting of his mother's opinions, saying "Mommy said so," calling his mother Mommy, at nearly 50 years of age. He uses his mother's opinions as a shield to justify improper behavior. However, his weakness becomes apparent as soon as I point these issues out. He quickly becomes disheartened. There were countless examples of these behaviors. Chairman Hale was astonished, mouth agape. Marjorie also showed embarrassment. Evan himself seemed not to understand what part of his behavior was problematic. Regarding calling off the engagement, is there any fault on my part? Yes. Chairman Hale shook his head almost imperceptibly. I paused to calm myself and took a deep breath. I will divorce my wife. Evan will also have to move out with her. The company's operations will be taken over by competent staff. Please do not abandon us. Help us. My deep breath seemed to make Chairman Hale anxious, and he suddenly declared his intention. What? That's not possible. I can't manage my life without this marriage, Marjorie cried out in shock. Evan and Marjorie raised their voices simultaneously. Why didn't you tell us beforehand? I'm innocent. The problem is only with Mommy. I'm not involved. Their protests stirred the room. Fed up, I finally sighed. Well, as you wish. Thank you for your time. I will take my leave now. I said this only to Chairman Hale and left quickly. I needed to go home and take my high-quality clothes to the dry cleaners immediately. Otherwise the champagne stains would set. Evan stopped protesting and wept, seemingly accepting the situation. Marjorie tried to retort but was silenced by a stern reprimand from Chairman Hale. However, she still gritted her teeth in dissatisfaction, looking far more determined than her son. 5 months after the unpleasant incident with the Hale family, as predicted, Chairman Hale resigned from his position. It was not just a retirement but a resignation, taking responsibility for the deteriorating performance of the company. The main reason for the decline was the termination of the contract with my company. A former subordinate who took over as the new president conducted a comprehensive review of operations. Breaking away from family management was well received, and external evaluations improved. He proactively developed new products and results began to show. At this rate, resuming the interrupted transactions might be imminent. Furthermore, Chairman Hale and Marjorie officially divorced. Evan moved out with Marjorie as anticipated and started a new life together. However, rumors persisted of daily conflicts between them. The once close relationship between mother and son seemed based primarily on financial comfort. After being expelled from his father's company, Evan quickly fell into unemployment. Unable to bear Evan's financial dependence, Marjorie left him in Chairman Hale's care and disappeared. I heard she now lives alone in an old low-rent apartment, mourning her fate. Marjorie once boasted of her lavish lifestyle, but her behavior pushed people away. Now she has neither helpers nor friends and has become a lonely figure. About a year after Chairman Hale's retirement, I had a chance encounter with the former chairman when visiting his former company. I am very sorry for the great inconvenience I caused, he said. He had generously transferred half of his property to Marjorie, but her financial troubles stemmed from Evan's demands and her continued extravagant spending. This is nothing but personal responsibility. Sympathy is hard to come by. Chairman Hale initially planned to keep Evan at a distance. However, he was shocked to learn that his nearly 50-year-old son did not even know how to boil water. Eventually they ended up living together. He is now firmly educating Evan, making household decisions. Evan, having depended entirely on Marjorie, struggles greatly. I feel I have not properly looked after my son and wife. This is the misfortune I created for myself. Although it's late, I am deeply reflecting. I think I also did wrong by Marjorie. Fortunately, the company did not go bankrupt. I am relieved. Now retired, Chairman Hale stays at home and is seriously engaging with Evan for the first time. Evan faces unprecedented challenges with household chores and part-time jobs. Despite his age, he frequently cries. I can only hope he becomes a decent person. However, I do not wish to have any more dealings with him ever again. 3 years have passed since then. My company is doing very well. My performance has improved, and the stock price has risen. Regarding my personal situation, I am no longer considering marriage. I informed my parents when I got engaged and explained everything when the engagement was dissolved. They supported my decision to remain single rather than approve involvement with such a person. As a result, my parents have become even stronger supporters of my dedication to work. I work actively every day and have taken up new hobbies to lead a more fulfilling life. Although I previously preferred indoor activities, I recently started exercising at the gym. I can visibly see muscles forming. My subordinates look at me with admiration, which feels ticklish. I always believe that happiness is something you grab for yourself. I seek happiness that I create on my own, not happiness dependent on someone else. If I were to fall in love again, it would be toward the end of my life. At life's end, one can afford to throw everything away for love. But that is not a concern for now. My days are fulfilling. I'm happy. My life has just begun, and I continue striving toward a bright future.